I was sitting 3 rows behind her, dead center. I wore a cap pulled low, sunglasses even though we were indoors, and a button-up shirt I hadn't touched in 4 years. My palms were sweating, even though the auditorium was freezing. The air smelled like popcorn and perfume. She was chewing gum. I hadn't seen her chew gum since 2019. She sat with her back straight, arms crossed, legs angled toward the aisle like she was always ready to leave. Like she'd bolt if the air shifted the wrong way. Next to her was a man I'd never seen before. Too handsome to be a stepfather, too polished to be a friend. He didn't look nervous. He belonged there. I didn't. I belonged in the shadows. And yet, there I was. For years. That's how long it had been since she last saw me. Not a text. Not a birthday message. Not even a scene on the email I sent when my father died. Nothing. She ghosted me like I never existed. But now, here she was. Our son was graduating, and she was back in the city like she hadn't scorched it to the ground on her way out. She even had the nerve to wear the same maroon dress I bought her for our last Christmas together. She'd told me it made her feel sharp, like a blade. It still did. But here's the thing. When she turned around, maybe sensing eyes on her, she looked right at me. I wasn't even hiding. No one else around. Nothing to block her view. And she didn't recognize me. Not even a flinch. Not a twitch of the mouth. Not a breath caught in her throat. Nothing. It was like I was a ghost watching my own funeral. And that's when I knew something was deeply wrong. The disappearance. Let me rewind a bit. But not to our love story. There wasn't one worth telling. No magical first dates. No whirlwind romance. We were ordinary. That was our whole thing. What matters is how she left. She didn't pack a suitcase. She didn't leave a note. She didn't scream or cry or accuse. She evaporated. One Monday morning, she just wasn't in the house anymore. Her toothbrush gone. Her side of the closet empty. Even the coffee grinder was missing. Like she took time to erase the tiny things too. There were no signs of struggle. No receipts. No goodbyes. Even our son, who was 14 at the time, didn't understand it. He just said, she blocked me too. Blocked. Her own kid. The rumors. People talked. They always do. Some said she joined a cult in Nevada. Others whispered she was living under a new name in Oregon. One of her coworkers claimed she'd seen her boarding a flight to Buenos Aires with a redhead who looked like a model. I didn't believe any of it. I thought she was dead. For months, I watched true crime YouTube channels hoping her name would pop up. I even messaged a few creators anonymously, sharing clues, hoping one of them would turn her disappearance into a story. But no one bit. Because dead people don't chew gum in auditoriums. The first letter. It came in a plain envelope. No return address. Just my name, scrawled in handwriting I knew better than my own. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No signature. Just 7 words. Do not look for me. Not yet. I read it once. Then again. And again. I memorized it. Burned it. Then went looking anyway. For years later. That brings us here. To the metal bleachers of Roosevelt High's gymnasium. To the moment our son, not hers, walked across that stage and looked directly into the crowd. He didn't smile. Didn't wave. He looked like a kid giving a signal. A warning. And for a second, I swear he saw me too. And looked afraid. I hadn't planned to talk to my son. Not that day. Not like that. I thought I'd stay hidden in the crowd, a quiet ghost haunting the edge of his milestone. I had imagined watching him from afar, clapping quietly, maybe slipping out before the lights came back on. Clean. Detached. Dignified, even. But that's not what happened. After the ceremony, the crowd funneled out into the gym's hallway, buzzing with camera flashes and cheap perfume, and congratulations, shouted too loud. I kept my head down, moving like a shadow, avoiding anyone who might remember my face from the old days. I was almost at the door when I felt someone tap my wrist, quick, deliberate, like a signal more than a greeting. I turned. It was him. Theo. My son. He looked taller than I remembered. Older. His jaw was sharper, his posture stiffer, like he'd built walls around himself that I'd never be allowed to climb. He didn't hug me. Didn't say my name. Just held out a folded piece of paper. I took it instinctively, like I was accepting a receipt I hadn't asked for. His eyes darted over his shoulder, where she stood with that same polished stranger. Vince, I guessed. She didn't see us. He leaned in close. Don't open it here, he whispered. Please. Then he walked away. I should have called after him. Said something fatherly like, I miss you. Or, You look just like your grandfather." But my throat locked up. It's like I wasn't even a person anymore, just a vessel carrying a message I didn't yet understand. I waited until I was back in my car, parked 4 blocks away in a pay-in-park lot behind a shuttered laundromat. Only then did I unfold the note. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to her. And it wasn't just any letter. It was a confession. The handwriting was small, messy, rushed, like it had been written in a panic or under duress. But I knew Theo's handwriting. I'd seen enough of his forgotten homework assignments and birthday cards to recognize the tilt of his LS, the way he dotted his eyes low. This was his. It read, "I know what you did in August. I remember the motel. I remember the screaming. I remember him. I lied to the police. I won't lie anymore." I read the letter 5 times. My brain refused to process it properly. August. Motel. Police. What the hell was this? I tried to remember the timeline. August was the month she disappeared. The month she ghosted me. I had always assumed she left because of another man. Maybe out of boredom, maybe to chase a new life. But police? Screaming? Motel? This wasn't a breakup. This was something else. Something worse. And for the first time since she vanished, I felt a different kind of fear. Not just fear of abandonment, but fear of what she might be running from. Or worse, what she might have done. I looked at the note again. There was no signature, no address. But at the bottom, in smaller handwriting, was a number. A 6-digit code. It wasn't a phone number. It wasn't a date. I had no idea what it meant, until I turned the page over and realized the paper was torn from a hotel receipt. A hotel I recognized. A hotel we used to go to when we didn't want Theo to hear us argue. Room 608. I hadn't been back to the Grantham in over 5 years. That place used to mean something else to me. Back when the worst thing I thought could happen in a marriage was a cold dinner and a slammed door. Delia and I had stayed there 3 times during our final year together. It was close enough to home that we could vanish for a night without worrying about Theo, but far enough that it felt like neutral ground. No history, no blame, just 4 walls and forced civility. We'd lie on the bed like strangers, saying everything except what we needed to say. And then, eventually, we stopped going altogether. That's when the real silence began. But now here I was, standing in the same lobby I once walked through with her hand in mine. Except now I was alone, holding a 6-digit code like it was a live grenade. The guy behind the desk barely looked up when I gave him the number. Just typed it in, frowned slightly, then handed me a card key without a word. No ID. No questions. Not even a receipt. That should have been a red flag, but I was too far down the hole to care. The elevator smelled like mildew and fake citrus. It shook on the way up, as if even the building was trying to warn me. The numbers glowed dimly with every passing floor. 602, 604, 606. Then 608. I stepped out and just stood there. My hand hovered over the door handle for a long time. Part of me was convinced that when I slid that keycard through, something irreversible would happen. That once I saw whatever was inside, I wouldn't be able to go back to the world as I knew it. But that world had already ended, hadn't it? The day she disappeared, the day my son stopped answering my texts, the day I became someone who reads confessions meant for someone else. So I slid the card. The door clicked. I pushed it open slowly, half expecting someone to be on the other side. But the room was empty, dark, despite it being late afternoon. The curtains were drawn, the air stale. The kind of stillness that only builds in rooms untouched for a long time. And yet, something was off. Not visibly, viscerally. The room still smelled like her. Not like perfume or body lotion. Something subtler. The cinnamon shampoo she used when she couldn't afford the expensive stuff. The same one I used to tease her about, saying it made her smell like Christmas cookies. It hit me the moment I walked in, like a memory buried so deep it had to be yanked out by force. My stomach turned. Everything else was ordinary at first glance. Neatly made bed. Neutral walls. A cracked lampshade. But then I saw the table by the window. There was something carved into the wood. I walked closer, squinting. It wasn't fresh. Old, probably years. Etched with something sharp, maybe a key, maybe a knife. It said, "I told you not to follow me." That's when the panic set in. I scanned the rest of the room, my pulse thudding in my ears. The closet was empty. The drawers held nothing but a faded Bible. But when I lifted the corner of the mattress, I found it. A black spiral notebook. The same kind she used to keep around the house to jot down sketches or grocery lists or passive-aggressive notes to me about leaving wet towels on the floor. But this one wasn't casual. The first page had no title, just the word witness written in capital letters. And beneath that, a date, August 18th, 2021. I flipped the page. What I read wasn't fiction. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't even a diary. It was a statement, the kind you give to the police. Page after page of descriptions, times, locations, physical details, names I didn't recognize. Then when I did, Theo. And then, near the end of the book, scrawled in handwriting that looked far more rushed and jagged than the rest, were 3 final lines. He wasn't supposed to see it. He said he wouldn't tell, but I think he already has. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the notebook shaking in my hands. Because now I wasn't sure if I was dealing with a woman who'd run from danger, or a woman who was the danger. And if Theo had been protecting her, what had he really seen? I didn't drive home that night. I didn't even go back to the motel. I parked outside an all-night diner and sat in my car until the sun came up, notebook on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. I couldn't bring myself to open it again. I already knew too much. Or maybe I didn't know anything at all. Just pieces, fragments, a trail of dust that might lead to truth or to madness. And I was too exhausted to care which. But one thing kept pulling at me. Theo. That single name buried in a stranger's statement. My son. The kid I used to carry on my shoulders at the county fair. The kid who once cried because he thought the moon was lonely. My son had seen something. Something no kid should see. And now he was passing me notes in secret, with eyes that looked like they'd aged a decade since I last saw them. I needed to talk to him. Not as a father. As an investigator. I told myself I'd ask him outright. Sit him down, eye to eye, and demand answers. But when I finally saw him again 2 days later, outside his school, I couldn't do it. He looked too tired. Too brittle. He barely spoke above a whisper. Said he could only meet for 10 minutes. Claimed he had a group project. He lied. I could tell. I used to be the world's leading expert in his tells. I knew the difference between nervous and terrified. I let him talk about safe things for a few minutes. Graduation, college applications, how he might major in astronomy, if I even go. Then, casually, or as casually as I could fake it, I asked him if he still used the same laptop I bought him 2 years ago. He hesitated, then nodded once. That was enough. Later that night, while he was in the kitchen pretending not to notice me, I told him I needed to check something on the school district's portal. He shrugged and handed over the laptop like it was nothing. I almost wanted him to stop me. I wanted him to grab it back and say, "You wouldn't understand what's on there." But he didn't. He just went back to washing a single glass, over and over again. I took the laptop into the guest room and locked the door. At first glance, everything looked normal. Clean desktop, boring folders labeled homework, essays, photos. But I knew the kid. He'd grown up with passwords the same way I grew up with toy trains. And I also knew he wasn't clever with them. He used references, things he thought no one else would guess. I clicked around for an hour before I found it. A folder hidden inside another, buried so deep it felt like a dare. The path read, /documents, biology/lab reports, /old, trash, /do_not_open/. The folder was locked, encrypted, but the program he used was amateur. I tried his favorite book character. Denied. His old gamer tag. Denied. Then, on a gut instinct, I typed in one word. Wallpaper. The folder unlocked. Inside were exactly 7 files. No names. Just timestamps and long strings of characters. 6 were video files. 1 was a TXT document. I opened the text file first. It was a transcript. A transcript of something Delia had said. Or maybe confessed. It was messy, jumping between phrases. Some lines were labeled with V, maybe for Vince, and others with just D. One line stood out above all the others. One that chilled me even more than the notebook in room 608. D. He's not coming back, Vince. You hit him too hard. We need to disappear. Now. I stared at it for a long time, blinking, rereading, doubting myself. Who was she talking about? Who got hit? Who wasn't coming back? And then I made the mistake of opening the first video file. It was surveillance footage. Grainy. Shaky. Filmed through what looked like a cracked car window. At first, I saw nothing. A parking lot. Then headlights. Then a figure walking fast. A woman, Delia, looking over her shoulder. She reached a car, fumbled with keys, and opened the door. A second figure ran into the frame. Male. Not Theo. Taller. Built. They argued. I couldn't hear them. There was no sound. But Delia's hands were shaking. She pushed him. He shoved her back. Then something happened, too fast to process. She ducked. The man raised his arm. There was movement, a blur. Then he collapsed. Just like that. No one else was around. Delia stood there for a moment, motionless, like the weight of the moment hadn't reached her yet. Then she dropped to her knees, searched the man's jacket, grabbed something, and ran. I slammed the laptop shut. For 10 minutes, I couldn't move. My wife was gone. My son was lying to me. And now there was a dead man in a video that nobody had reported missing. Unless he was reported, just not under his real name. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, staring at the laptop like it might start speaking to me if I waited long enough. At one point I opened the video again, not because I wanted to, but because I had to convince myself I hadn't imagined it. That what I saw, what Delia did, was real. That the man crumpling to the pavement hadn't just slipped or fallen or fainted. He'd been struck. Something brutal, something unseen. And Delia, she didn't even hesitate. She went through his jacket like she was following a script. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I didn't call the police. I couldn't. I didn't trust them. Not with this. Not with her. Not with Theo. If I handed over the video now, they'd bury him in questions, maybe in something worse. I needed to understand the full picture before anyone else got their hands on it. So I started with the footage, frame by frame. I grabbed stills from the video and ran them through every open-source image enhancement tool I could find. I was looking for anything: license plates, business signs, timestamps, even nearby landmarks. It took hours, but eventually, I found it. A street sign at the edge of the frame, caught for just half a second. Marrow Street. Marrow Street. A back road near the industrial edge of town. I knew it vaguely. The kind of place you only drove through by accident. Warehouses, overgrown fences, silence. No security cameras. No foot traffic. No reason to be there unless you were trying very hard not to be seen. I went there. In daylight, the place felt sterile. Clean even. Too clean. No chalk outlines. No police tape. No signs of life or death. But the spot was unmistakable. The cracked pavement, the graffiti on the light pole, the broken drainage grate. It was all there, just like in the video. I stood in the place where the man had fallen. Tried to imagine what it felt like, being him. Who was he? Why had Delia met him there? Why did he raise his hand first? Back in the car, I pulled up the video again. There had to be something more. Some tiny detail I missed. And that's when I noticed something. In the frame where Delia goes through his jacket, barely visible in her hand, was a wallet. I froze the image. Zoomed in. Couldn't see the ID clearly, but I knew what it meant. She took it. Took everything that could identify him. That's why there were no missing persons reports that matched. No headlines. No body recovered. She didn't just kill someone, she erased him. Or tried to. But she missed something. Because when I went home and dug through the bottom of an old storage bin, I found a box I hadn't opened since before she disappeared. It was labeled receipts and old mail. Junk, mostly. But at the very bottom was a letter I never remembered seeing. Postmarked July 2021. No return address. Just a plain envelope, sealed sloppily, addressed to her. But it had ended up in my pile, probably by accident. Inside was a photograph. Her, younger, standing next to the man from the video. His arm around her waist. Her smile too wide, too forced. Something in her eyes looked distant, like she was already gone. And on the back of the photo, in scrawled handwriting I didn't recognize, were the words, "You owe me a name, Delia. Don't think I've forgotten." It wasn't signed. There was no context. But the man in the photo, he was the same one who dropped to the pavement in that video. And that's when the sinking dread hit me. Whoever he was, Delia knew him long before I did. Long before Theo. Before the marriage. Before the job, the house, the pretending. He didn't just show up in her life. He was from the version of her I was never allowed to see. The one that existed before she became Delia, the woman I married. And if she was willing to kill to keep him silent, then whatever name she was hiding must be powerful. Dangerous. Deadly. So I did something reckless. I went to the library. Not the public one, the county archives. I requested access to the digitized voter registration logs from the late 90s. That's when she said she'd moved here from back east, though she never specified where. I used the birth date on her driver's license and ran it through a few cross-reference tools. Dead ends at first, until I found a match. Same birth date, same approximate height, but a different name. Marina Kellis. No middle name, just Marina. A ghost. She changed her name in 2003. Legal record sealed. Reason, protected witness status. The trail ended there. And that's when I realized I was too far in. My wife wasn't who I thought she was. And neither was I. I didn't eat for almost 36 hours. Food didn't feel real anymore. Time felt warped. The days started blending together like oil and water, visibly separate, but always touching. I found myself going back to the video over and over again, like some kind of masochist, as if staring into it long enough might make it rewrite itself. Like maybe this time, she wouldn't do it. Maybe this time, he'd duck the blow. Maybe this time, she'd look up at the hidden camera and mouth help me. But no, every time it was the same. Strike. Collapse. Silence. I couldn't keep chasing theories in the dark. So I did something I never imagined myself doing. Not in this life. Not in any version of it. I called someone I hated, my brother-in-law. Her older brother. Graham. Graham and I never got along. He always looked at me like I was an experiment Delia had decided to run, just to see how long it would take before I cracked. He was the only person from her life before me that she didn't erase. They were close, in the way siblings who share secrets from their parents tend to be. After she vanished, he never reached out. Never asked how Theo was doing. I assumed he cut us off out of loyalty to her. But now I wondered, did he know who she really was the entire time? I called from a burner app. He answered on the second ring, his voice just as cold and clipped as I remembered. What do you want? I didn't waste time. I know about Marina, I said. Silence. Then, you don't know anything. I know she changed her name in 2003. I know there's a sealed court order. I know there's a body she buried, figuratively or literally. I'm still figuring that part out. His breathing slowed. Then a tired sigh. Why now? She's back. I saw her at Theo's graduation. He muttered something under his breath, something like, stupid, stupid, then said, you need to stop digging. I'm past that, I said. I've already found the hole. I'm just trying to figure out how deep it goes. That was when he gave me a name I never expected to hear. Detective Camila Rhodes. Retired. Chicago PD. Homicide Division. Graham said, if you're serious, and I mean really serious, you talk to her. But you don't mention my name. And if you think you're ready for answers, don't say I didn't warn you when they don't make sense. I found her 2 days later. A small house in Evanston, near the lake, surrounded by overgrown ivy and a no-soliciting sign that looked like it had been there since the 1980s. I expected an interrogation. I expected suspicion. But when I told her Marina Kellis was going by Delia now, and that I had reason to believe she was connected to a missing person in 2021, the woman didn't blink. She just said, come in. The house smelled like dust and paper. Her walls were lined with boxes, files, folders, handwritten notes. She poured coffee without asking if I wanted any, and sat me down like she already knew exactly what I was going to say. She was 17 when she disappeared, Camila began. Testified in a federal trial involving organized transport fraud. Her testimony was complicated, accurate, but too personal. She wasn't just a witness. She was involved, deeply, though they protected her anyway. Her handler, Agent Vaughn, sealed her record, relocated her, gave her a fresh start. I wasn't supposed to know any of this, but I worked the case that preceded hers. A man was murdered. His name was Cole Marin. I froze. Cole, I asked, heart slowing like something mechanical breaking down. She nodded. Went by other names. Slippery bastard. But he was smart and dangerous. The kind of guy who knew how to vanish, how to blackmail, how to twist leverage into survival. And Marina? I asked. Delia. She was his leverage, Camila said simply. And eventually, his liability. Everything started to realign in my head. The cryptic note. The photograph. The voice in the transcript saying, you hit him too hard. Maybe Vince didn't hit him too hard. Maybe it was her. I asked Camila if the murder ever got solved. No, she said. And it won't be. Because he's not in the system. You mean his body? She shook her head. I mean his identity. Marina. Delia. She made sure of that. She cleaned up the paperwork, erased the trace. But I know that death. I know what silence smells like. I asked her if she ever reported her suspicions. She laughed, dry, bitter. To who? The people who paid to bury it? When I left her house, I felt like my ribs had caved in. There was no air left in the world. I drove without a destination. I thought about Theo, about what kind of blood he had in him, about what kind of fear he must have carried, keeping her secret all this time. And for the first time, a thought crept into my brain, one so alien it terrified me to even let it form. What if she didn't just kill him out of fear? What if she enjoyed it? There are things I've seen now, things I've pieced together in the last few weeks, that make it hard to remember what kind of man I used to be. I don't just mean before the divorce. I mean before all of it. Before the video. Before the notebook. Before the transcript. Before I found out my wife had lived under a name that wasn't hers. I used to be boring. Predictable. The guy who labeled his spice rack. The guy who balanced his checkbook and always folded towels into thirds. That man is gone. I don't know who's telling this story anymore, but I know he doesn't sleep. He barely eats. And all he thinks about now is what she did to our son. Because that's where this ends. Not with her fake name. Not with the body she left behind. But with Theo. It started with the second video on his laptop. I hadn't touched the others since the night I first watched the one from Marrow Street. But something inside me couldn't let it go. I needed to know why he filmed them. Why he kept them. Why he labeled them the way he did. Just numbers and timestamps. No descriptions. Like he couldn't bear to call them what they really were. The second video wasn't security footage. It was handheld. Shaky. Recorded from behind a stack of boxes in a dimly lit garage, maybe a storage unit. The air looked heavy. Concrete walls. One light bulb overhead, flickering. It looked like a place no one ever intended to return to. In the frame, Delia was talking to someone, but not facing the camera. She stood sideways, arms crossed, voice low. I couldn't see who she was speaking to, but I could hear something in her tone I hadn't heard before. Not fear. Not anger. Something colder. Control. She was instructing someone. The audio was muffled, but I could pick up enough. No names, never directly. If they ask questions, you redirect. You don't flinch, ever. There was a pause. Then a softer voice answered. What if they remember? Delia stepped forward, blocking the camera briefly, then leaned back again. Then we erased that, too. I watched the whole video 3 times before I understood what disturbed me so much. It wasn't just what she was saying. It was who she was saying it to. Because in the final few seconds, when the camera shifted slightly and the person holding it must have stood up or moved, just for a second, their reflection appeared in the garage window. It was Theo. He couldn't have been older than 13. And he was crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in that quiet, broken way that kids cry when they know no one is going to save them. He held the camera like it was an anchor, like it was the only thing tethering him to something real. That's when I realized something that shattered me. She didn't just confide in him. She trained him. She brought him into whatever life she was running from. Or worse, whatever life she couldn't let go of. And she did it deliberately, piece by piece, like boiling a frog, slowly turning the heat until he couldn't tell what was burning. And then, I remembered the letter he gave me at the graduation. I know what you did in August. He wasn't writing that as a threat. He was writing it as a son who wanted to be freed from a secret that didn't belong to him. A boy who watched his mother do something irreversible and was told to carry it like a soldier. I felt sick. I wanted to grab him, to hug him, to say I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I missed it. I'm sorry you had to be strong when I was too stupid to know anything was wrong. But it was too late for that kind of softness. There were still 3 videos left. And a pattern had formed, each one darker than the last. I opened the third, and that's when I saw the footage of Theo, alone, walking into a building I didn't recognize. At first, until I did. It was the back entrance to the county courthouse. The date on the video? 2 days before Delia vanished. And this time, it was Theo doing the talking. The last video was the hardest to watch, not because of what it showed, but because of what it didn't show. No violence. No running. No shadows or screams or secrets exchanged in dim garages. Just a hallway. Carpeted. Beige. A buzzing light overhead, flickering like a broken signal. At the end of the hall, a door, Judicial Chamber C. Theo stood in front of it, still wearing his school jacket, holding a manila envelope. He looked small. Not young. Just small, like everything on him had been folded in too many times. He knocked twice. A voice from behind the camera said, "Come in." He pushed the door open and disappeared inside. That was it. The video cut there. No explanation. No context. Just proof of something that changed everything. I didn't know who recorded it. Maybe it was internal surveillance. Maybe Theo did it himself. Maybe he needed to leave a breadcrumb. Or maybe it was for me. Maybe he knew that one day I'd come looking for the version of the story that no one dared to say out loud. The one where he saved himself. That night, I called Graham again. This time, he didn't pretend not to know anything. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He sighed. He cut a deal with them. Quiet, sealed, completely off the record. She took the fall. My hands clenched. "You mean Delia?" "Marina," he corrected. She turned herself in, sort of. It was messy. Complicated. She gave them what they needed. Names. Places. Years of rot. And then she asked for one thing. Protection for Theo. An erased trail. Full immunity for his involvement. He wasn't supposed to be there when it happened. Cole wasn't even supposed to find her. But she made sure he wouldn't touch Theo again. In a twisted way, she ended it to protect him. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to scream. I wanted to thank her. I wanted to ask 1,000 impossible questions. "She's in a facility now," Graham added quietly. "Not prison. Something quieter. Cleaner. She doesn't want contact. I doubt she ever will." "And Theo?" I finally asked. "He got out clean," Graham said. "And I mean clean. College applications, new city, no ties. You don't have to worry about anyone coming for him. The wolves are gone." For a long time, I just sat there with the phone to my ear, nodding silently to someone who couldn't see me. And then, for the first time in what felt like years, I cried. Not out of fear or confusion or grief, but from something unfamiliar. Relief. It wasn't perfect. None of it would ever be. There are parts of Theo's childhood he'll never be able to explain to anyone. There are still names I'll never know, documents I'll never see, and questions that were answered in sealed courtrooms I'll never be allowed to enter. But the weight is gone. And more importantly, he's free. We talk more now. Slowly. Carefully. Sometimes just about music, or books, or a documentary we both watched. The other day, he sent me a photo of his dorm room. Messy bed, 2 mini empty Red Bull cans, a whiteboard with half-erased formulas. There was something handwritten in the corner that caught my eye. It said, "I'm not him. I'm not her. I'm me." It wasn't signed. It didn't have to be.